Hello, my name is Pete Brown, former president of the board of directors, and I'm here today to interview two very qualified candidates for the Lake of the Woods board of directors. Before we start with them, I do want to remind everyone that we are a non-stock corporation, which means we have to have an annual meeting, which means we have to have a quorum of 800 people. So we need you to vote this year. So even though the election is uncontested, we need your vote. And at the end of these interviews, there will be information on how you can do that. So our first candidate today, as I said, a very qualified individual, Jim Zavrel, has been head of the planning committee.
Yes.
Has served on several other committees, ad hoc fence committee for one. But Jim, welcome today.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you for being here to talk with me about the role on board of directors.
Good. And the elections committee has prepared some questions, so we're going to kind of go through those today. Then maybe at the end, we'll just let you freewheel talk about why you should be one of our directors.
Sure.
All right. So our first question then, our board of directors goals for the term of 2022-23 include a goal regarding new revenue sources and changing financial needs. That's a goal number 3. Future challenges include labor costs, availability of persons to fill these vacant positions, and the impact of inflation. So, how should LOA prepare itself for the challenges such as these?
Well, Pete, I think LOA is in a unique position right now in that we're in a transitional period. We're no longer a rural recreational lake community. We are fast becoming a suburban bedroom community with more and more commuters working over in Fredericksburg and north on 95. And we are going to have a lot of pressure on us to maintain our infrastructure, to maintain the 50-year-old infrastructure that was built when this lake first opened back in the late 70s. So these challenges are something we have to address. And I think the current board has gotten off to a really good start by putting together an ad hoc committee on future revenue sources and future financial goals to meet. I think that's an excellent first start, because if you communicate clearly to the membership that we have these challenges coming up, if you communicate clearly with members who see the needs that are important to them, and you're prepared, then I think it will be a much smoother transition. And I think those are the two keys, being proactive and communicating well. And I think that's the way to bring us forward as we come under more pressures from our outside the gates.
Very good answers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. The second question that was prepared, we want board members who vote with Low residents' best interest in mind. Do you or your spouse have any business interest in Low, which residents of Low are customers?
No, none at all. My wife and I are both retired. And to be perfectly honest, I have no real agenda in running for the board at this time. There is no one issue that I really will advocate for as I enter the board service. At this point, I'm a blank slate, and I intend to listen to the membership, and I intend to act in a way that represents their needs and interests, not my own, because I really do this out of civic responsibility.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jim. What future capital projects do you consider to be critical?
In running for the board, I have 3 major capital projects that I believe are critical and need to be acted upon sooner than later. The first is stormwater management and care of our lakes. Our lakes are our most valuable asset. They define our community. And if we don't keep them clean and vital and usable for all purposes, recreational, fishing, we are going to lose our community assets quickly. So we have to maintain the lake, and that means avoiding erosion, doing stream restoration. It also increases our need to do regular dredging in the lake and cleaning up in both the lakes.
Yeah.
I shouldn't include just our main lake. So that's the first project. The second project as everyone is very aware of right now, is the congestion at our front gate. We need to continue to improve access to our community. I find it really interesting that Lake of the Woods is the largest population center in Orange County. We dwarf the town of Orange, yet we only have 2 entrances in and 2 exits out, one of which can't be used by contractors or business people. The town of Orange, you can't imagine having only one way in and one way out. So we need to improve our front gate, get that flow moving better, and then look at adding a 3rd or perhaps 4th gate. Lake Monticello, which is a close, comparable community down near Charlottesville, they have 7 entrances and exits. That's something we need to try and work towards. So that is the second. And then the third area that I think really is important is to maintain the infrastructure we have now. The update of the clubhouse is a great example. The infrastructure we have in many cases is almost 50 years or over 50 years old. So we're going to have to put in the money to maintain these things and keep our community vibrant and attractive to maintain our home values. So those are the 3 things I'm really seeing as the important goals.
Thank you, Jim. Next question. If you are elected, what is the one thing that you will bring to the board that you believe will be a real value added in representing the interest of our members?
Well, the one area I think I have a real advantage and a way to add to the community is my experience. I have been involved in homeowners association management since I bought my first home in 1985. I always felt that it was a civic responsibility to get involved. Homeowners associations are a necessary evil. They sometimes get a bad rap by people because they feel like they're being dictated to by a group of isolated people. And that's not my intention. My intention is to represent the members, but also look out for the good in the community. In Western Fairfax County, in my previous home, I served as president of our homeowners association for 5 terms, including when we were first made independent of our developer. So I have experience developing our first set of architectural guidelines, experience doing our first reserve studies, doing our complaint process that's required by the Virginia Property Owners Association Act. And we were self-managed, so we didn't have a manager or management company to help us with that. So I have a good working knowledge of how that works on a very small scale. This is now the big leagues. I intend to bring that experience and bring that knowledge base and bring some of those ideas to help here at the lake with its much bigger budget and much bigger population.
Very, very good. You mentioned something a moment ago that the next question speaks directly to.
Yes.
The board of directors has selected a plan to alleviate congestion at the main gate, which you said was one of your areas of concern. How would you fund it?
I'll try to keep this simple because this is something I've thought about in my role on the planning committee and as chairman of the planning committee. We have 2 funding sources that we may be able to access that would not affect the assessment directly. The first is, as everyone probably knows, our park project, our pool and fitness center project and clubhouse project was funded using a 7-year loan. We are now in the 6th year of that loan, and according to our finance manager and general manager, next year's assessment for CARC should not take up the full $191 that we are currently paying.
Okay.
So I foresee possibly using a portion of that special assessment money to go towards the front gate. In other words, if it only requires us to take about $100 from each lot owner to pay off the CARC loan, maybe that additional $90 can go towards paying for the front gate. That would, of course, be required discussion.
Yeah.
And decide if that's what we want to go with. The second way of funding it is come out of my work with members of the finance and planning committees. We were working a working group to examine the minimum balance in the reserve study. We have a required minimum balance that we carry as part of our reserve funds. Mm-hmm. It turns out that 2 years ago, that level jumped quite a bit. And it was mainly because our vendor, Miller Dotson, went to a formula where they are taking the average of the next 40 years' expenditures and saying we should hold that back as reserve. There is no legal requirement for that much money. There is no actual industry standard to have that much money. We currently have about $1.9 million in reserve in the reserve projects reserve. If we need to tap that to help pay for the main gate, I think that is a worthy purpose for that money, and then we can pay that back over the next couple of years. In that way, we would not have to have a special assessment to pay for the front gate, which I believe right now is budgeted for about $800,000 in the next budget. This year, we have $100,000 devoted towards the design work for fiscal year 24-25. I believe the cost is going to be about $800,000 and probably a little more. So if you see those two funding sources, we should be able to pay that amount without having too much effect on the assessment.
Thank you. Wow. And you obviously have put a lot of thought into this since you worked on that.
Being on those committees, yes, it's come up.
Good. We look forward to your insight. That'll be helpful.
Thanks.
Okay. The next question. If you are elected to the board of directors, are you more likely to favor improving our amenities or keeping the annual assessment as low as possible? As an example, if 40 members commented at a board meeting asking that the assessment not be increased for the coming year, but our hired experts advise that more must be spent to keep an existing amenity safe and usable, or much more will be required in future years, which path would you vote for and why?
That is a difficult question because I don't believe we can answer it as an absolute. Each case must be taken on a case-by-case basis. I would prefer not to have to increase assessments more than inflation forces us to. However, I believe our main priority is maintaining the amenities we have now and the assets we have now. So we have to maintain and do whatever repairs are necessary to maintain the clubhouse, the lake, the golf course, the pickleball facility. Once we maintain them, then we look at new assets and additions individually and say, are they a good value? Do they add value to our community? And is it a cost benefit? Is it the cost low enough that the benefits outweigh them? It's inevitable we're going to have to raise assessments. It is virtually impossible to reduce them in our current environment in the age of our community. But I certainly want to be very cognizant of the weight of increasing them and certainly be able to explain them. And that's another area where communication is key. If those 40 homeowners and lot owners come in and say, we really don't want to raise the assessment, then you have to communicate to them, well, these are the things that need to be done. And if we can't do it under the current assessment, we're going to have to raise it somewhat. It's a very difficult call. It's going to be the source of friction. I'm sure it was when during your time on the board, is there's always the friction between improvement and keeping down the level of assessment as much as possible. So it's got to be case by case.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. The next question, do you have any ideas about encouraging our association members to participate in LOA committee work?
Yes. As a committee chairman, I ran into this problem quite often where it was hard to get people to volunteer to come out and work on the committee. Luckily, I was able to convince a couple of our smart and experienced members of the community to come back into doing committee work to help with planning committee. And that was integral in my success or whatever success I had on planning committee. I think the way to get people involved in the committees is make sure you know how well appreciated they are and how important the committees are to the running of this lake. There's no way the board of directors, the 7 people on the board, can do all the research and do all the thought processes needed to maintain our lake. So you let people know that these committees are very important. You let them, I would be in favor of having an annual reception for the committee members to thank them for their work and to talk about what their interests and needs are and what they see is the most important part of their work. And then when we had the committee fairs in the past, I felt that was a really good source of bringing people in, telling them what the committees do and why they're important, and getting them interested in serving. As I said, one of the reasons I'm running for the board, and I've been involved in homeowners associations for over 30 years, is because of civic responsibility. If you have the time and you have the knowledge, you should try and come out and help our association, because that makes it a more friendly, neighborly place to live. And everybody feels like they've invested and a stakeholder in the lake. So I would hope just showing appreciation and recruiting is the best way to go about doing that.
That makes a lot of sense. Great. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Now, the next question is, what is your understanding of our reserve study and how Lake of the Woods Association uses it?
Yes. The reserve study is a very misunderstood but very important part of our capital planning process, of which the planning committee is, I don't want to say in charge of, but what we are charged to work with is the reserve study. For those of you who may not be familiar with it, it's basically an inventory of all of the assets that we own as a community. We have over 800 assets, everything from boats to bulldozers, it's from plumbing and roof and electrical systems to kayak racks. And the reserve study gives us an inventory of all those items and a useful economic life for them, and then helps us plan for when they are obsolete and need to be replaced. So it's important that we understand that the reserve fund is paid for in your current assessment. Your assessment for the 2023-24 year is already putting money aside for future reserve replacements. So this is paid for in our current assessments. We have to maintain what we have, and this is a way to make sure we maintain it in the most efficient and cost-effective way. Now, we don't replace things if they don't need to be replaced. So the reserve study is a guide. It's not an absolute requirement. It tells us what is coming close to need to be repaired. Whether we replace it or not is up to the individuals who advise us.
Very good. All right. Next question. What is your philosophy on spending in relation to lower assessments? Is it more important to keep the assessment fees down while maintaining our amenities, or to focus on developments that will enhance property values, and why?
Well, this gets back to the previous question. It's got to be done on a case-by-case basis. Overall, I hope to discuss with the board keeping our assessments as reasonable as possible, but maintenance is the most important thing we have to do at this stage in the life of our community. As we get more traffic in and out, it's vitally important that we have better access. So the front gate is going to have to be done, and then we have to maintain it. The assets that we use so heavily and love to use, like the lakes and the beaches, the golf course, they have to be maintained. So that's our primary priorities. If we can do that at the lowest possible assessment level, I'm all for it. But in terms of enhancing our property values, it's a cost-benefit analysis. If we get proposals for new assets and improvements, we have to evaluate them on a case-by-case basis and look for ones that are a good value. One of our criteria on planning committee is always going to be, is this a good value for the home, for the lot owners? Not always how are we going to pay for it, but is it a good value? Will it raise money? That's always a favorite of ours. If it raises income to help pay itself off, much like the fitness center has done.
Yeah.
So
very good.
Okay.
All right, Jim. Well, we have a final question here. What do you think should be the top priority for the lower board in your first year?
In terms of physical infrastructure and improvements, definitely the stormwater management plan, the lakes management plan, and the front gate, the completion of the front gate improvements, followed by a study of working on a third gate to try and get better access, smoother access to our community. In terms of general ideas, I really love the fact that the board has started doing the coffee and conversations again with our members to do outreach, to get out and talk to members of the community as neighbors and say, what is it that you like about the lake? What don't you like about this community? How can we make it better for you? So I think communication and outreach are a very important part of our role that we've lost during the pandemic because we haven't been able to physically do it. So now I really want to see the lake kind of open up again after the pandemic, and the board communications, I think, and outreach is a big part of that.
Very good. Well, you've answered all the questions quite well, and I thank you so much for your time doing this. But I'm going to just throw you a curve, I guess, maybe here. Just give me a 30-second elevator speech on why people should vote for Jim Zavrel for the Loa Board of Directors.
I think the best thing I can say on my own behalf is that I am not running with any preconceived notions or agenda. I have experience. I have worked with homeowner associations. I have worked with planning commissions up in Northern Virginia in my previous life. And so I am very interested in community activities and in civic affairs. And I am doing this because I enjoy, this is my way to contribute to the community. So I hope to make many more friends and get to meet all my neighbors and have fun. The lake should be a fun place to live, and we should do everything we can to enjoy what we have and to maintain it so that our kids and grandchildren can enjoy it as we move on down the line.
Well, Jim, thank you very much. It's
thank you,
a pleasure
Pete.
Talking with you today, and good luck in the election.
Thank you very much, Pete. I appreciate it.
And thank you all for watching.
Thank you.